March 14th, 1943, 2:47 a.m., Szalak left 3, Nazi-occupied Poland. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and a thin layer of frost covers the barbed wire that surrounds one of Germany's most secure prisoner of war camps. In the darkness of Barrack 104, a young British officer named Flight Lieutenant Thomas Edward Calnan lies awake on his wooden bunk, staring at the ceiling. His mind isn't dwelling on the monotony of captivity or the meager rations that keep prisoners perpetually hungry. Instead, he's calculating distances, memorizing guard patterns, and visualizing a journey that most men would consider suicide. Within 72 hours, Calnan will breach the wire of this fortress. Within 30 days, he will escape from 3 different POW camps, traverse over 200 miles of hostile territory, and cement his name in the annals of military history as one of the most audacious of the Second World War. But this story doesn't begin in the cold Polish night. It begins 8 months earlier in the burning skies over occupied France, where a simple reconnaissance mission would transform into a nightmare that would test the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. Before we dive deeper into one of the most incredible escape stories of World War II, if you're fascinated by untold stories of courage and determination, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This channel brings you the most gripping tales from history that deserve to be remembered. And if you enjoy this story, leave a like and let me know in the comments which escape story you'd like to hear next. Now, let's continue. August 19th, 1942, the sky above Dieppe, France, erupts in a hellstorm of anti-aircraft fire. Operation Jubilee, the ill-fated Allied raid on the French coastal town, has turned into a bloodbath. Of the 6,000 men who stormed the beaches that morning, nearly 4,000 would become casualties. Flying overhead in a Spitfire, providing air cover for the retreating forces, Flight Lieutenant Calnan watches the chaos unfold below. His aircraft shudders as German flak tears through the fuselage. Black smoke begins pouring from his engine. He has seconds to make a decision that will alter the course of his war. At 23 years old, Thomas Calnan is the son of a London solicitor, educated at Cambridge, and trained as one of the RAF's finest pilots. His service record shows 17 successful combat missions over Europe. But on this August morning, none of that training prepares him for what comes next. As his Spitfire spirals toward the French countryside, trailing flames and smoke, Calnan manages to wrestle the controls long enough to avoid crashing into a French village. He pulls the ejection handle at 800 feet, barely clearing the aircraft before it explodes in a farmer's field near the town of Enfield. The parachute descent lasts less than a minute, but in that time, Calnan's mind races through his training. Every RAF pilot receives instruction on escape and evasion. They're taught to avoid main roads, seek help from the French resistance, move only at night, and head south toward neutral Spain. Simple instructions. But as his boots hit the ground in occupied France, surrounded by German soldiers who witness his descent, those instructions become meaningless. Within 20 minutes of landing, Calnan finds himself in the back of a German military truck, hands bound, heading toward an uncertain fate. The first interrogation takes place in a converted schoolhouse in Rouen. The German intelligence officers are methodical, almost courteous. They already know his name, rank, and squadron from his identification tags. What they want is information about RAF tactics, aircraft capabilities, and planned operations. Calnan gives them nothing but his name, rank, and service number as required by the Geneva Convention. The interrogator, a Luftwaffe captain who speaks perfect English, smiles patiently. "You'll be more comfortable in a proper camp, Lieutenant." This stubbornness serves no purpose. 3 days later, Calnan boards a train heading east toward Germany, joining dozens of other captured Allied airmen in a journey into captivity. The train journey provides Calnan's first opportunity to assess his fellow prisoners. There's a Canadian pilot named Peterson who lost half his crew over Hamburg, an Australian navigator called Mackenzie who survived when his Lancaster exploded at 20,000 feet, a Polish fighter pilot named Wojtek who's been shot down twice and captured once before. These men share a common bond beyond their capture. They all possess that peculiar combination of optimism and recklessness that characterizes naturalists. Before the train even crosses into Germany, they're already discussing possibilities. Dulag near Frankfurt, serves as the primary interrogation and processing center for captured Allied airmen. It's here that Calnan spends his first month in German captivity, housed in a solitary cell designed to break prisoners' spirits before sending them to permanent camps. The isolation is psychological warfare. No books, no companionship, minimal food, and interrogations that come at random hours designed to disorient and exhaust. But Calnan uses the time differently than his captor's intent. He begins exercises in his cell, maintaining physical fitness. He memorizes every detail of the facility's layout during his walks to interrogation. He studies the guards' routines, noting which ones are diligent and which ones are lazy. Most importantly, he begins to understand a fundamental truth about prisoner of war camps. They're designed to contain ordinary men who've accepted captivity. For those who refuse to accept it, weaknesses always exist. By October 1942, Calnan arrives at his first permanent camp, Stallachloof III, located near the town of Sagen in Lower Saxony, roughly 100 miles southeast of Berlin. This camp will eventually become famous for the Great Escape of March 19. But when Calnan arrives, it's still being expanded, and the security measures that will later make it infamous are not yet fully implemented. The camp sits in a clearing carved from pine forests, surrounded by 2 parallel barbed wire fences, each 10 feet high, topped with coils of razor wire. Between the fences, German guards patrol with dogs. Watchtowers equipped with searchlights and machine guns stand at intervals of 150 feet around the perimeter. A warning wire runs 30 feet inside the main fence. Any prisoner who crosses it can be shot without warning. The barracks are raised on stilts to prevent tunneling, with clear ground underneath, allowing guards to spot any excavation attempts. Despite these formidable defenses, Stallachloof III becomes a university of escape. The camp houses some of the most determined and creative escapers in Allied captivity. Squadron leader Roger Bushel, who will later mastermind the Great Escape, is already organizing escape committees and coordinating efforts. The prisoners establish workshops where they forge documents, manufacture civilian clothing from dyed uniforms, and create compasses from smuggled materials. They develop an intelligence network that tracks guard movements, train schedules, and security procedures. Every prisoner with useful skills, tailors, forgers, engineers, language experts, contributes to the collective effort. Calnan throws himself into this clandestine world with enthusiasm. His Cambridge education makes him valuable for document forgery. His athletic build suits him for physical escape attempts. But more than skills, he possesses an almost reckless determination. While many prisoners contribute to escape efforts without actually planning to go themselves, Calnan has no intention of sitting out the war behind barbed wire. He volunteers for every escape scheme, studies German with fanatical intensity, and physically prepares himself for the ordeal he knows is coming. The first opportunity comes in January 1943. A work detail is scheduled to leave the camp for forest clearing outside the main compound. Calnan volunteers, seeing it as a chance to reconnoiter the area beyond the wire. The work involves cutting trees in sub-zero temperatures, brutal labor that most prisoners avoid. But for Calnan, it's intelligence gathering. He notes the positions of external guard posts. He observes that the guards become less vigilant as the day wears on, particularly after lunch. He calculates distances to the nearest railway line. Most crucially, he identifies a drainage ditch that runs from the worksite into the forest, obscured by undergrowth and barely visible in the snow. On January 27th, during a heavy snowfall that reduces visibility to less than 50 yards, Calnan makes his move. While other prisoners create a distraction by staging an argument with a guard, he slips into the drainage ditch and crawls toward the tree line. The ditch is partially frozen, filled with icy water that soaks through his clothing within seconds. But he keeps moving, pulling himself forward through the slush, knowing that if he's spotted now, he'll be shot. The crawl takes 17 minutes that feel like hours. When he finally reaches the forest and looks back, the work detail continues as normal. The guards haven't noticed his absence yet. The euphoria of freedom lasts approximately 3 hours. Calnan, soaked and freezing, follows the railway line east, hoping to reach the town of Sagen, where he might steal civilian clothes or stow away on a train. But hypothermia begins setting in faster than he anticipated. His fingers lose feeling. His thought process becomes sluggish. When he stumbles into a small village seeking shelter, a German farmer spots him immediately. A man in an RAF uniform, soaking wet in the middle of winter, is hardly inconspicuous. The police are called. By nightfall, Calnan is back in Stallachloof III, spending 2 weeks in the cooler, the camp's isolation cells, as punishment. Most men would accept defeat. The cooler is designed to break Spirot's, a concrete cell barely large enough to lie down, with minimal heating, bread and water rations, and nothing to occupy the mind except regret. but Calnan emerges more determined than before. He's learned valuable lessons. First, winter escapes in RAF uniform are suicide. Second, he needs civilian clothes and proper documentation before attempting another escape. Third, speed is essential. He must put maximum distance between himself and the camp before the alarm is raised. Over the following 6 weeks, Calnan prepares with methodical precision. He trades cigarette rations to acquire a German railway worker's cap and jacket, carefully modified from stolen items. The camp's forgers create a travel pass identifying him as a foreign worker heading to Berlin. He studies railway timetables smuggled into the camp, memorizing routes and connections. He learns enough German to pass casual conversation, and crucially, he identifies his next opportunity. March 14th, 1943. The date that opens our story. A new batch of prisoners is arriving at Schlachtluf 3, and the camp's routine is disrupted by the processing and housing assignments. In the confusion, Calnan notices that the gate between the compound and the Vorlagertha outer administrative area is frequently opened without the usual security checks. It's a small window of opportunity, perhaps lasting only a day or two until normal procedures resume. But it's enough. At 2:30 p.m., dressed in his railway worker disguise with documents hidden in his jacket, Calnan simply walks toward the gate, carrying a wooden crate, as if on official business. His heart hammers against his ribs. Every instinct screams that he'll be stopped, questioned, shot. The guard at the gate glances at him, sees a worker carrying supplies, and waves him through without a word. Calnan forces himself to maintain a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow. He crosses the outer compound, exits through the main gate where civilian workers are leaving after their shifts, and within 5 minutes of leaving his barrack, he's walking down the road towards Sagan as a free man. The sensation is intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Every passing vehicle might be searching for him. Every pedestrian might recognize his face if the alarm has been raised. But Calnan maintains his role. Walking with the confidence of a worker heading home, he reaches Sagan's railway station at 4:15 p.m. and purchases a ticket to Berlin using German currency accumulated through trading in the camp. The station is crowded with workers, soldiers on leave, and civilians. No one gives him a second glance. When the Berlin train arrives at 5:47 p.m., Calnan boards a third-class carriage and finds a seat near the window, watching the countryside slide past as darkness falls. The journey to Berlin takes 6 hours. Calnan spends them in a state of hyper-alertness, mentally rehearsing his cover story, ready to bolt if police board the train checking documents. But the checks never come. He arrives in Berlin's Hauptbahnhof at 11:53 p.m., stepping onto the platform into the heart of Nazi Germany, 200 miles from the nearest Allied lines. Most escaped prisoners attempt to reach neutral Switzerland or Sweden, or they head west toward France, hoping to contact resistance networks. But Calnan has studied the geography extensively and made a different calculation. Berlin, despite being the enemy capital, offers something smaller towns cannot: anonymity. In a city of over 4 million people, with thousands of foreign workers from occupied territories, one more face disappears into the crowd. But Berlin also presents immediate problems. It's nearly midnight, and anyone wandering the streets after curfew attracts police attention. Calnan needs shelter, but he has no contacts. Nusafi House has no resistance network to call upon. He makes his way to Berlin's Tiergarten, the massive park in the city's center, reasoning that he can hide in the wooded areas until morning. The park is largely deserted, though occasional police patrols sweep through with flashlights. Calnan finds a dense thicket of bushes near the Landwehr Canal and settles in for a sleepless night, listening to air raid sirens wail in the distance as RAF bombers pass overhead on their way to targets in the city. Dawn breaks cold and gray on March 15th. Calnan emerges from the park, stiff and exhausted, but he forces himself to maintain the appearance of normalcy. He finds a workers' cafe near a factory district and uses precious German marks to buy Erzot's coffee and dark bread. The cafe is filled with tired men starting early shifts, and no one pays attention to another foreign worker. But Calnan knows his time is limited. Without ration cards, he can't buy food. Without proper housing documents, he can't rent a room. And most critically, his escape will have been discovered hours ago, meaning his description is being circulated to police throughout the region. His best option is to reach one of Berlin's many railway freight yards and stow away on a train heading west. But first, He needs to identify which trains are heading toward Holland or Belgium where he might contact resistance networks. Over the next 2 days, Calnan becomes a ghost in Berlin, sleeping rough, scavenging food, and observing the railway operations at the Tempelhof freight yards. He notes that westbound freight trains depart in the early morning hours, typically between 3 and 5 a.m. Security's minimalist guards focus on preventing theft of cargo, rather than checking for stowaways. On March 17th, at 3:20 a.m., Calnan breaches the freight yard fence and makes his way between lines of boxcars, searching for one heading west. He finds a car marked for Hanover, half filled with machinery parts, leaving enough room to hide. He climbs aboard, burrows into a corner behind the cargo, and waits an hour later. The train lurches into motion, carrying him away from Berlin. The journey to Hanover should take approximately 6 hours. But at 8:15 a.m., the train makes an unscheduled stop at a small station. Calnan hears voices outside, then the sound of the boxcar door sliding open. Light floods his hiding spot. Two railway security guards stand at the entrance, and from their expressions, this isn't the first time they've found stolen. They're not surprised. They're not even particularly concerned. One of them simply says in German, "Come out." Slowly, Calnan is taken to the station office where local police are called. His forged documents don't survive serious scrutiny. The travel pass has expired dates, and his story about being a check worker falls apart under questioning. By noon on March 17th, less than 72 hours after escaping Stalag-Luft 3, Calnan is in custody, being transferred not back to the camp but to a local prison in the town of Braunschweig to await return to military prisoner facilities. This is where most escape stories would end. Recaptured, under guard, awaiting transfer to a high-security facility with likely extended punishment and solitary confinement. But for Thomas Calnan, this is merely the first chapter. Because Braunschweig prison, designed to hold civilian criminals, is not equipped for military prisoners. And crucially, the guards here don't understand the mentality of determined escapers. Calnan is placed in a second-floor cell with a barred window overlooking a courtyard. The cell is secure enough for ordinary prisoners who accept their confinement. But within 2 hours of arrival, Calnan is already assessing possibilities. The window bars are old, set in crumbling mortars. The courtyard below is used by prisoners during exercise periods, and he notes that guards don't maintain constant surveillance. Most importantly, he observes that the prison's outer wall, while has a maintenance shed built against it, creating a stepping point that could allow someone to reach the top. For 3 days, Calnan works on loosening one of the window bars. He uses a metal piece torn from his bunk frame, slowly excavating the mortar around the bar during the night, then replacing the debris with a paste made from bread and water that looks like mortar in casual inspection. The work is agonizingly slow and filled with wrist guards. Check the cells periodically, and any sound of metal on stone could alert them. But by March 20th, one bar is loose enough to remove. At 2:30 a.m. on March 21st, Calnan removes the bar, squeezes through the window, and lowers himself to hang from the sill before dropping 12 feet to the courtyard. The impact jars his ankles, but he rolls with the fall and immediately sprints for the maintenance shed. The courtyard is illuminated by a single floodlight, meaning large areas remain in shadow. He reaches the shed without raising an alarm, climbs onto its roof, and from there pulls himself to the top of the outer wall. On the other side is a residential street, quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. Calnan drops to the pavement and walks away from the prison, becoming the only prisoner to escape from Braunschweig prison in 1943. He's now accomplished something remarkable, escaping from 2 separate facilities within 1 week. But he's also in a more precarious situation than before. His description will now be circulated not just to POW camp networks, but to civilian police as a prison escapee. He's in central Germany, far from any border, and he's still wearing prison clothing that marks him as a fugitive. Calnan makes his way to the Braunschweig railway station, arriving just as morning commuters begin filling the platforms. In the confusion of the early rush, he blends into crowds, seeking an opportunity. He spots a worker's shed near the tracks, breaks in, and finds coveralls hanging on a hook knot, perfect but better than prison clothing. He changes quickly, discards his prison uniform, and boards a local train heading west toward Oslo, reasoning that smaller towns near the Dutch border offer better chances of reaching occupied territory where resistance networks might help him. The train journey is tense. Calnan has no ticket, no documents, and no plan beyond reaching the border region. He hides in the toilet whenever conductors pass through the carriage, emerging only when the coast is clear. Other passengers give him odd looks, a disheveled man in ill-fitting coveralls, clearly agitated but in wartime Germany. Everyone is tired and preoccupied with their own problems. The journey takes most of the day, with Calnan switching trains twice to avoid ticket checks. By evening on March 21st, he reaches the outskirts of Osnabrück, approximately 50 miles from the Dutch border. But here, his luck finally runs out at a railway checkpoint on the town's edge. Police are conducting document inspections, likely a routine security measure, but fatal to Calnan's escape. When he tries to slip past the checkpoint by walking along the tracks, a guard spots him and shouts for him to halt. Calnan runs, but he's exhausted, malnourished, and wearing clothing that restricts movement. The guard doesn't shoot, possibly because they're near civilian areas, but he gives chase. And within 3 blocks, Calnan is cornered in an alley, hands raised in surrender. This time, the Germans take no chances. Calnan is identified as an escaped POW, and military authorities are immediately notified. He's transported under armed guard to Stalag Weiße, a Wehrmacht prisoner camp near Oz, specifically designated for troublesome prisoners and those awaiting court-martial or punishment for escape attempts. Arriving on March 22nd, exactly 8 days after his initial escape from Stalag 3, Calnan finds himself in the most secure facility he's yet encountered. Stalag Weiße is not a regular POW camp. It's a punishment facility designed to hold prisoners who've attempted escape or violated camp regulations. The security is formidable: concrete buildings instead of wooden barracks, cells instead of open dormitories, constant guard presence, minimal exercise time, and isolation from other prisoners. Calnan is placed in a solitary cell, told he'll remain there until arrangements are made to transfer him back to Stalag 3 with additional punishment to be determined. The cell is 8 feet by 6 feet, containing a metal bunk, a bucket for waste, and nothing else. A small window, high on the wall, provides minimal light but no view. Guards deliver meals through a slot in the doorbread, thin soup, and occasionally a piece of sausage or potato. Exercise consists of 30 minutes per day in a small yard, under guard supervision, with no contact with other prisoners. It's psychological warfare, designed to break the spirit of even the most determined. But Calnan refuses to be broken. During his brief exercise periods, he studies every aspect of the facility. He notes that the guard schedule changes every 8 hours, with a brief period of reduced vigilance during the shift change around 6 a.m. He observes that the exercise yard, while enclosed by high walls, has a drainage grate that leads to an underground culvert, and most importantly, he recognizes that Stalag Weiße's very strength, its reputation as escape-proof, makes the guards complacent. They don't expect anyone to attempt to escape from a punishment facility. Over 5 days, Calnan prepares. During exercise periods, he loosens the bolts on the drainage grate using a metal piece he's managed to extract from his bunk. The work is done in brief moments when guards aren't directly watching, and he replaces the grate each time to avoid detection. He also observes that the culvert visible through the grate is large enough for a man to crawl through and appears to lead outside the facility's walls. It's a desperate plan with multiple points of failure, but it's the only option available. March 27th, 6:05 a.m., the morning shift change creates a brief window in the exercise yard. Guard steps away to coordinate with his replacement. Calnan lifts the drainage grate, which he's loosened over previous days, and drops into the culvert below. The space is claustrophobic, barely wide enough for his shoulders, and absolutely dark. He can't see where the culvert leads, but he crawls forward on his stomach, pushing through filthy water and debris, fighting claustrophobia and the certainty that he'll become trapped. The crawl lasts approximately 40 minutes, though in the darkness and confinement, time becomes meaningless. Calnan inches forward, feeling the culvert's direction changes, praying it leads outside the compound and not to a dead end. His shoulders scrape against concrete. Water soaks through his clothing. At one point, the space becomes so narrow he considers turning back, but the thought of returning to that cell drives him forward. Finally, he sees light ahead, the culvert's exit, opening into a drainage ditch beyond the camp's outer perimeter. Calnan emerges into morning sunlight, covered in filth, gasping for air, but free for the 3rd time in 13 days. He's accomplished something unprecedented, escaping from 3 separate facilities: a POW camp, a civilian prison, and a military punishment facility in less than 2 weeks. But he's also reached the limits of his endurance. He's weak from minimal rations, exhausted from stress and lack of sleep, and his clothing's now completely unsuitable for travel, covered in sewage and torn from the crawl through the culvert. Nevertheless, he forces himself to move. The drainage ditch leads away from the camp into agricultural land. He follows it for approximately 2 miles, putting distance between himself and Stalakvitsi before the morning roll call reveals his absence. He finds a small stream where he attempts to wash the filth from his clothing and himself, partially restoring a more presentable appearance. Then he heads west again, still aiming for the Dutch border, now only 40 miles away. But 40 miles in Nazi Germany as an escaped prisoner is an almost insurmountable distance. Calnan has no documents, no food, no currency, and no contacts. Every farm he passes is a potential threat. Every vehicle on the road might be searching for him. He travels at night, hiding during the day in barns or forests, scavenging whatever food he can find. By March 29th, he's crossed into the border region, tantalizingly close to Occupy Holland, where resistance networks might offer help. On March 30th, near the town of Lingen, approximately 15 miles from the Dutch border, Calnan's extraordinary run finally ends. Attempting to steal clothing from a farmhouse, his own clothes are now in tatters. He's spotted by the farmer who calls the police. Weak, exhausted, and recognizing the futility of running, Calnan surrenders without resistance. This time, he's too valuable a prisoner to be held in local facilities. He's transported directly back to Stalag Luft 3 under maximum security, arriving on April 2nd, 1943, exactly 19 days after his initial escape. The statistics of Calnan's achievement are remarkable. In 19 days, he escaped from 3 different facilities. He traveled approximately 300 miles through Nazi Germany. He eluded capture multiple times, surviving in hostile territory without resources or support. According to records maintained by MI9, the British military intelligence section responsible for escape and evasion, only 3 other Allied prisoners during the entire war managed to escape from more than one facility in such a short time frame, and none achieved it from 3 separate locations. Upon return to Stalag Luft 3, Calnan faces punishment: 60 days in the cooler, followed by transfer to a high-security compound with enhanced supervision. The cooler is harsh isolation, minimal food, no contact with other prisoners. But when he emerges in June 1943, he's treated as a legend among the POW population. His triple escape has become camp folklore, inspiring countless other attempts. Even the German camp commandant, while publicly denouncing his actions, privately expresses a grudging respect for his determination. Calnan continues attempting escapes throughout his captivity. In October 1943, he participates in a tunnel attempt that fails when German guards discover the excavation. In January 1944, he attempts to hide in a trash cart being removed from the camp, only to be discovered during a routine inspection. None of these subsequent attempts succeed, but they demonstrate that even after his unprecedented triple escape, Calnan never accepts captivity as permanent. The war's final year sees Calnan still in Stalag Luft 3 when the Great Escape occurs on March 24th to 25th, 1944. 76 men escape through a tunnel called Harry, though all but 3 are recaptured, and 50 are executed by the Gestapo on Hitler's personal order. Calnan, confined to a high-security section due to his escape record, doesn't participate in the tunnel break, likely saving his life. The German decision to murder recaptured escapers marks a turning point after March 19. Escape attempts dramatically decrease as prisoners realize they're no longer protected by the Geneva Convention's rules regarding POW treatment. In January 1945, as Soviet forces advance into Poland, the Germans evacuate Stalag Luft 3. 10,000 prisoners are force-marched westward in what becomes known as the Long March, a brutal trek through winter conditions that kills dozens of prisoners. Calnan survives the march, is liberated by advancing American forces in April 1945, and returns to England after 3 years of captivity. After the war, Calnan's story receives surprisingly little attention. The Great Escape, with its tragic outcome, dominates public consciousness regarding POW escapes. Calnan himself doesn't seek publicity, returning to civilian life and rarely discussing his wartime experiences. He works in business, marries, raises a family, and lives quietly until his death in 1993. His obituaries mention his RAF service, but give minimal details about his extraordinary escape achievements. Yet for military historians and students of escape and evasion, Calnan's story remains uniquely significant. His triple escape demonstrates several crucial factors that separate successful escapers from those who fail. First, preparation. Calnan's meticulous observation of security procedures, accumulation of resources, and physical conditioning provided the foundation for his attempts. Second, adaptability. When plans failed, he immediately improvised new approaches rather than accepting defeat. Third, relentless determination. Even after multiple recaptures, he never stopped looking for opportunities. Calnan's story also illuminates the broader reality of POW escapes during World War II. Of approximately 170,000 Allied prisoners held in German camps, fewer than 800 successfully escaped and reached Allied or neutral territory, a success rate of less than half of 1%. The vast majority of escape attempts ended in recapture within days or even hours. Calnan's achievement of remaining free for extended periods, multiple times, places him in an exceptionally rare category. The psychological dimension of his escapes is equally noteworthy. Prisoners who attempt escape face extraordinary stress, the constant threat of being shot, the knowledge that failure means severe punishment, and the psychological toll of living on edge in hostile territory. Most prisoners, even those who participate in escape preparations, ultimately find the psychological burden too great and remain in camps. Calnan's willingness to repeatedly face that stress, even after experiencing the hardship of failed escapes, reveals an unusual psychological resilience. From a military perspective, escape attempts served purposes beyond individual freedom. Each escape forced the Germans to divert resources to searches, investigations, and enhanced security. Guards who might otherwise serve on frontline units instead manned POW camp watch. Police units conducted manhunts rather than suppressing resistance movements. In this sense, even failed escapes contributed to the Allied war effort by creating operational burdens for the Wehrmacht and civilian authorities. Calnan's specific achievement of escaping 3 facilities in 1 month created disproportionate disruption. After his triple escape, German authorities conducted extensive reviews of security procedures at multiple camps. Guards faced disciplinary action for the lapses that enabled his escapes. Enhanced security measures were implemented, requiring additional personnel and resources. For a single prisoner to create such widespread impact demonstrates the strategic value of determined resistance, even in captivity. The moral dimension of Calnan's story speaks to fundamental questions about duty and resistance. The Geneva Convention requires prisoners to provide only name, rank, and service number 2 captors. It doesn't require escape attempts. Yet British military culture during World War II strongly emphasized that escape was a duty, that remaining in captivity when opportunity existed represented a failure to continue fighting. Calnan clearly internalized this ethic, viewing every day in captivity as a day he wasn't contributing to the war effort. This attitude contrasts sharply with the practical reality most prisoners faced. The odds of successful escape were minimal, the risks were substantial, and conditions in POW camps, while harsh, were generally survivable for those who avoided antagonizing guards. Many prisoners made the rational calculation that attempting escape endangered not just themselves but their fellow prisoners, who faced collective punishment when escapes occurred. Yet without prisoners like Calnan who rejected this calculation, the entire culture of resistance within POW camps would have collapsed. His story also raises questions about the psychology of incarceration. Why do some individuals refuse to accept confinement while others adapt to it? Research on POW behavior suggests that officers, particularly pilots, were most likely to attempt escape. Their training emphasized initiative and aggressive action. Their pre-capture experiences involved taking risks and operating independently. These traits, while valuable in combat, made adjustment to the passive submission required in captivity psychologically intolerable. Calnan embodied this profile-educated author, trained to make independent decisions and temperamentally unsuited to accepting the role of passive prisoner. The practical knowledge Calnan accumulated during his escapes also proved valuable beyond his own attempts. After his return to Stalag-Luft III, he contributed to the escape committee's collective knowledge, sharing information about security procedures in different facilities, railway operations, geography of the regions and tactics that succeeded or failed. This intelligence helped plan future attempts by other prisoners and was eventually forwarded to MI9 in London via coded letters, informing training for future aircrew who might face capture. In the broader context of World War II escape narratives, Calnan's story occupies a unique niche. Unlike The Great Escape, it lacks the dramatic scale of a mass breakout. Unlike famous home runs, where escapers successfully reached Allied territory, Calnan's attempts all ended in recapture. Yet the sheer audacity of achieving 3 separate escapes in such a compressed time frame makes his story exceptional. It represents not the culmination of elaborate planning by dozens of men, but the determination of a single individual who simply refused to remain captured. The legacy of prisoners like Calnan extends beyond military history into questions about human nature. What drives someone to repeatedly risk their life for freedom when survival in captivity is assured? The answer goes beyond patriotic duty or military obligation. It touches on fundamental aspects of human dignity, the refusal to accept imposed limitations, the drive for self-determination, and the willingness to endure hardship in pursuit of agency. Calnan's multiple escape attempts, even after experiencing the consequences of failure, demonstrate that for some individuals, the psychological cost of accepting captivity exceeds any physical hardship they might face in resisting it. Today, Stalag Luft 3's site contains a museum dedicated to the Great Escape, with monuments to the 50 murdered prisoners. Braunschweig prison no longer exists, demolished in the post-war years. Stalag Weisse's location is now industrial development, with no markers indicating its wartime history. The places that held Calnan have vanished or been transformed, yet his story persists in military records and the memories of the dwindling number of World War II veterans who heard it firsthand. For modern audiences, Calnan's tale offers lessons that transcend its specific historical context. It speaks to the value of preparation, the necessity of adaptability when plans fail, and the power of determination in the face of apparently insurmountable obstacles. It demonstrates that success isn't always measured by ultimate outcomes. None of Calnan's escapes achieved the goal of returning to Allied lines, yet each represented a victory of will over circumstance. It reminds us that in the darkest situations, when external freedom is denied, internal freedom, the choice to resist, to maintain agency, to refuse submission, remains. The numbers tell part of the story. 3 escapes, 19 days of freedom, 300 miles traversed through enemy territory, multiple recaptures, and ultimate survival. But numbers can't capture the psychological dimension, the moments of terror as guards approach, the exhaustion of traveling without food or rest, the crushing disappointment of recapture, and the courage required to plan the next attempt despite having experienced failure. These human elements transform Calnan's story from a historical curiosity into a testament to human resilience. In the final analysis, Thomas Edward Calnan's triple escape stands as one of the most remarkable individual achievements in the history of prisoner war resistance. While others achieved more famous escapes, reached Allied lines, or participated in larger breakouts, no one matched his record of escaping from 3 different facilities in a single month. His story deserves recognition not just for its audacity, but for what it reveals about the limits of human determination and the impossibility of truly imprisoning the human spirit. When Calnan returned to England in April 1945, scouted from malnutrition and exhausted from his ordeal, he stepped off the transport plane into a world that had moved on. The newspapers were filled with reports of Germany's imminent collapse, the liberation of concentration camps, and plans for post-war Europe. Individual stories of survival and resistance, even extraordinary ones, seem small against the backdrop of history's greatest conflict reaching its conclusion. Calnan didn't seek attention. He'd done what he believed was his duty. That was enough. But in the decades since, as historians have pieced together the full story of resistance within Nazi POW camps, Calnan's achievement has gained recognition. His name appears in MI9 records as one of the most determined escapes. Military historians cite his triple escape as evidence that even the most secure facilities contained weaknesses for prisoners willing to risk everything. And in the memoirs of fellow prisoners who survived the war, Calnan is remembered as an inspiration, proof that accepting captivity was always a choice, not an inevitability. The story of the soldier who escaped 3 POW camps in 1 month is ultimately a story about choice. Every prisoner faced the same fundamental decision: accept captivity and wait for the war to end, or resist and face the consequences. Most chose acceptance, a rational decision that ensured survival. But for men like Thomas Calnan, that choice was impossible. Their nature demanded resistance, regardless of cost. In that refusal to submit, in that willingness to endure repeated failure and keep fighting, lies a lesson that transcends military history and speaks to the fundamental question of what it means to be truly free. If this story of incredible courage and determination moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There are countless untold stories from World War II that deserve to be remembered, and your support helps bring them to light. Drop a comment below and let me know, what other escape stories would you like to hear about? Did you know about Thomas Calnan's remarkable achievement before today? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one man's refusal to remain captive, share this video with others who appreciate true tales of human resilience. Thank you for watching, and remember, freedom is never given. It's taken one brave decision at a time.